Hello, I'm AbX2Cat and welcome back to another second channel video. Today I have some more Geography of Toycat for you all. It's everyone's favourite second channel series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I figured I'd do something I like doing on YouTube, which is answering a question I had myself but couldn't necessarily find a very clear answer to in video form. And today, one of those questions that I've always been curious about, because the European Union isn't massively widely understood here in the UK and it's not massively taught, one of the things I was always curious about is because you can measure the EU like it is a country in forms of like population, in forms of like GDP, you can even find stuff like the currency out, its time zone, it even has its own president, it even has a national anthem. If you don't know, it's Ode to Joy. You might have heard it before, it's this. Just in case you've heard that. But yeah, the EU has so many things that make it like a country, the second largest economy on the planet, but it doesn't have a capital like every single other country in the world has. It just has Brussels as its de facto capital. So why does the EU only have a de facto capital, and why is it Brussels of all places? Because without being offensive to any Belgians out there, Belgium is definitely not the biggest or most important member of the EU, and Brussels is not the biggest or most important city, or is it even central? If you look at Brussels and you compare it to a map of the EU, this is Brussels right here, and this is all of it to the east. So why did they choose somewhere that was so non-central, and why did they choose Brussels to be the kind of centre/capital of the EU, but only the de facto capital? That's what I'll be explaining in today's video. Hopefully you all do enjoy it. And also, when we get near the end, I want to round back round to the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, because there's some funny stuff with that. But with that said, let's start by talking about Brussels, because like I said, it's the capital of the EU. Why did they pick it? Because, like with most things, I guess, in history, you can explain this by going, well, it doesn't make sense today, but history, and that's true here too, because the European Union, as you know it today, is the 28 members thing, wasn't how it was formed. It was formed by just 6 members as the European Coal and Steel Community. So basically, just after World War II, you know, bad things had happened once more on the continent. 6 countries got together. That was West Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Italy. They got together and they decided, let's make a coal and steel community, the European Coal and Steel Community, and the basic idea was they're going to be less likely to go to war if they do this. There's a few other reasons, but basically they wanted like kind of a supranational body to do this whole thing, and to make things just better and have more trade, and good things basically. And yeah, so they decide to do this, but they need a legislature body to do what they want to achieve, because they decide they want to have some proper rules between them, so they need a place to write that legislature. However, because, you know, the countries weren't all the same size, so Germany was a major power, as you're all probably aware, or West Germany I should say, France obviously, and Italy, they wanted to have it themselves, but they knew that none of the other two would agree on that, so it basically came down to between Netherlands, Belgium or Luxembourg having the capital of the EU. Funnily enough, Belgium actually didn't want Brussels to be the capital. It really heavily pushed for Liège, which I think I've been to Liège once before, but yeah, basically they pushed for Liège to be the capital, but eventually, you know, the rest of the EU really wanted Brussels, so they just said, yeah, we can go with that, and that's the basic story. But why did they say, yeah, let's go with Brussels? Why not Luxembourg City? Again, a much smaller country to have more benefits like that. Why not to have like Amsterdam or Rotterdam or something like that? Why did they want Brussels? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, Brussels is a pretty international city. It's a French/Dutch dual-speaking, you know, city. It is, you know, was owned by the French at one point, then by the Dutch at one point. It was occupied by Germany during both World Wars, funnily enough, and yeah, because it's also the capital of NATO, they figured, yeah, this seems like a great place to achieve what we want to achieve, so they started putting their body, you know, their legislative bodies there, which eventually evolved into what we have today. So Brussels was never truly chosen as a capital, it was just chosen as a place to do things, because again, it's a really non-busy city, it's kind of central to the 6 countries they had back then, and it just seemed like a great place to meet up that was kind of neutral for all of them. So yeah, the long story short of why Brussels is the capital of the EU is because it made sense a long time ago and then kind of just stayed that way. So why have we not updated the capital from Brussels to somewhere else? And again, the easy answer to this is, well, history. Brussels kind of does still make sense today because it is its own federal, you know, Belgium is a federal structure, a federal structurally federally structured country, and it's divided into the Flemish community and Wallonia. However, Brussels, as the capital region, kind of has its own separate rules, sort of like Washington, D.C. does in America, where it's not a state, but sort of has some rules like one. Brussels is like that, and because of all the EU business and the fact that it is the EU capital, there's a lot of benefits of the EU being based there. You know, everyone from the EU can all be in the same kind of area, and the city kind of exists as an EU place. 50% of all office space in the Brussels region is owned by EU purposes, which is crazy when you think about it. A lot of businesses in that area exist just to serve the EU, and it means that the EU has a capital that exists as an EU capital that a lot of people actually kind of quite like. So yeah, if Brussels is a place that people like for, and it's a historical place, it's a people like for the future, why have we not just declared it the capital of the EU already? So, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, because there's some contention between Strasbourg, where some of the European Parliament is still held, even though the European Commission, all the big deal, the European Parliament, and the other big deal of the EU, they're all held in Brussels. Officially, some stuff is still done in Luxembourg, and some stuff is still done in Strasbourg. Because Strasbourg was the temporary place they chose, back when they were just first doing stuff. And, yeah, basically, Strasbourg has a veto over moving stuff from there. And even though it's inconvenient to, once a week, move everything from Brussels to Strasbourg, then move it all the way back, they just do it because it's really good for the French economy, and good for French, people to have some part of the EU there. So, yeah, that is why Brussels can't, that's one of the reasons why Brussels can't be officially chosen as the EU. The second one is because of, I guess, the whole problem of the EU. The EU is slowly integrating more and more and more, and a lot of countries don't like that. You'll notice how there's a lot of countries with, I guess, nationalist movement. I guess the UK is the biggest example, right? We left the EU because we felt it was getting too close, among other reasons. And yeah, this is a problem a lot of EU countries have, where they don't want it to feel closer and closer. And by naming capital, you're kind of doing that. The last big official push there was to a, proper EU was perhaps the European Constitution years ago, and that failed a lot of referendums and had to be entirely rewritten. The fact that the European Union came up with a, Ode to Joy as their anthem, it's a little bit ridiculous to some people. They say, why do we have a national anthem? Why do we have a national flag? That's not good. We're not a nation. We're a collection of nations. And to some extent, it's like an issue of if the US 50 states all were the individual countries and they felt they're getting too close. But yeah, basically, the Brussels is not the official EU capital because, one, it's in contention a little bit, but two, a lot of countries don't want a capital. They want, their capital to be an official capital, and Brussels is just the place where EU stuff is done, which happens to be what a capital is. So yeah, that is why Brussels is the capital of the EU. Maybe that was too long and dense. If it was, let's go really quickly and just say, well, Brussels was chosen because history, and no one has a better solution. So we're sticking to Brussels, and there's your nice easy. And people don't want a capital, so it's just the capital. That's a really nice, easy, short explanation. Hopefully you did all enjoy today's video. Before we go though, I think I mentioned earlier how I talk about the president of the European Commission, or the president of Europe, if you want to be all fancy about it. Basically, I think I mentioned him a bit because if you haven't ever looked him up, he's one of my favorite leaders in the world. Not because he's like a great leader or anything, but because if you ever look up like what he does, he's just kind of funny. So here's a few. Okay.
The Brexit vote, which has echoes across the EU, is this the beginning of the end of the European Union?
No.
There's moments like that where he's just like non-seriously answers journalists because he doesn't care. There's also moments where like, okay, so there was a big EU summit. This is something you probably don't like if you're a Hungarian or whatever. So he's meeting each of the leaders one by one for a photo shoot, and oh jeez, and he mentions how one of them's a dictator. You can see how like he that's, he like slaps one of them in the face like that. He compares his tie to one of the dudes from there. Even like the big shots, like the the leader of France, for instance. I think he goes past him a little bit. He just does weird things for all. He does very weird things for all of them. And my point being is just he's a funny man, and you should look him up sometime. There's a subreddit called reddit.com/r/junker, and if you like funny, you. Then this is the guy for you. I don't know. That's just a fun little fact I'd add on here. Like the European Union can seem like a serious place sometimes, and having a guy that's willing to slap other leaders is that a good thing? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Hopefully you learned a thing or two here. If you did, that's good. If you didn't, then I'll see you all next week. Second channel. Don't care. Goodbye.